Hi everybody, and welcome to the Blue Bassoon handmade tutorial on how to reduce a round circular cane. So this is about the size of cane that I'm usually working with, but this method should work with a circular cane of almost any size. One thing that I like to note is that it's much easier to reduce a cane if you're starting with something that's at least maybe an inch and a quarter in thickness already, or in length rather. It's just really hard to get it started if it's much shallower than that. So this is what I'm going to start with and work with today, and I'm going to take you through every single step of how I reduce a round cane. So the way that I'm going to start is pretty simple. I'm just going to start compressing it with my middle fingers and my thumbs, trying to compress it kind of evenly all the way around, and I'm focusing on pressing in the center part of the cane. Just press, and sometimes I will interlock my hands like this so I can get a better grip on it in more of a like four corners style, because I want to try to put mostly even pressure on it from all around the edge instead of just squishing it in one direction like that. So I'm just putting even pressure from the four corners, and as you can also see, I rotate it as I go because, again, I don't want there to be any like uneven compression. We want to work towards really even compression to maximize, or rather minimize, distortion in any part of the cane. So as I've been doing that, again, I'm putting like firm pressure, but I'm not squeezing really hard. I like to opt for consistent firm pressure rather than burning out my hands. That consistent firm pressure is going to be much better than like squeezing really hard with every step, because the more you just sort of compress it incrementally, little by little, the more evenly that cane is going to reduce. So now that I've been doing that consistent firm pressure for a couple of minutes, and I will note that this cane is fairly warm. I've been leaving it to sit in a sunny window for a couple of hours to make it a bit easier to reduce. So leaving it to sit in a sunny window for a couple of hours allows it to warm and come to the same temperature all the way through. So yours might take a little bit longer if you started out with a colder cane. So once I start to get like a bit of an indentation in the center, sort of like, a spool of thread or something like that, I will switch to pressing it in between my thumb and my forefinger like this, just to continue that even pressure all the way around the cane. And then it's good to flip it over every once in a while to swap the direction of the compression, again to combat distortion as much as possible. And when I do this with my thumb and forefinger, it's like a soft to medium firmness. I really don't want to squeeze it too much. I want to err on the side of, consistency and little by little rather than big squeezes. And as I start to make the center thinner and get it to be a little bit longer, I might move my pressure away from the center and more towards this area here, kind of in between the center and the edge, to encourage that compression to extend a bit out of the center. And you can see I'm kind of achieving that here. We're getting a little bit more compression moving out this way. So now I'm going to do it on this side. When you're reducing a cane, it's really good to not be in a hurry and just to, let yourself be mindful. Listen to the clay, listen to your hands. If your hands are a little bit sore, take a break, or just go with squeezing a little bit less hard. It might take you a little bit longer, but I promise you'll get there. So now that I've gotten kind of like a barbell shape out of it, I really want to work on this area here. So I'm moving away from the thin part in the center, and I want to extend that thin part by putting some pressure on the area where it starts to thicken, right in there. So I'm going to do that on both sides with my interlocked four corners, thumb and middle finger. Do it on the other side. Again, we're looking at not the center part, but like where it just starts to get wider, and we're going to put pressure there. And you can see what is happening as I'm doing that, putting pressure on the slightly thicker area out of the center, is it's starting to force the clay in the center to squish out further than the outside of the cane. And this is a good thing. This is exactly what I'm going for, because so many times if you're just rolling the cane, or if you're pulling it, what's happening if you're rolling it or pulling it is you're really just activating the outer like 30 or 50% of the clay, and you're not doing much activation of the very center of the cane. And that means that you're going to get a lot of waste, because you're going to end up with the outer edge of the cane moves out way further and faster than the center of the cane, and you're going to also end up with quite a bit of distortion. So this technique really kind of does the opposite of that, with the aim of both reducing waste and really minimizing distortion. So once I get like a pretty good like flat section in the center, and I'm seeing that I'm getting that sort of bulge out of the ends, I'm going to move on to a stage where I'm going to compress the ends a bit, bring them together, make them a little bit smaller, more reduced, and at the same time, I'm pushing on the center. So by the time I'm done with this part, the center will be flat again, and the end will be reduced a little bit. So here's how I do that. I hold it with my holding hand, and then whatever hand I feel like is my dominant hand that I feel more comfortable with doing the fine motor stuff, it's gonna vary. Like I write with my left hand, but for some reason I feel more comfortable doing this with my right hand. I'm literally pushing inward. I'm pushing this way, and I am also pushing down with my pointer finger. So it's both in and down, in and down. And I just do that again, medium firm pressure, little by little, rotate it just a little bit each time. And I'm also pushing back with my other thumb to kind of create this kind of motion. So I'm very much supporting it with the back of my hand. And then as I do the in and down with this hand, I'm also pushing back a little bit with my other thumb to really even out that compression action. All right. And I'm keeping very much an eye on the edge of the cane and making sure that it's remaining even and that all of the edges of it are getting the same amount of attention. And it's good to kind of switch directions every once in a while. And then if you feel comfortable, switch hands. That's the ideal. If you can't switch hands, then that's completely okay. But switching hands will just like allow for like a very, very even amount of compression with minimal twisting. All right. So you can see the difference between what I've done now. I've reduced this end. I've made it a little bit longer, and I've evened out that bulge. So I'm going to do the same thing on this end. I've talked about this before in my other tutorials, but again, take your time. Put on a movie that you've watched a million times, something you can just like listen to that'll keep you company. Or you can even like have a conversation with a friend, honestly, if it's not too distracting. And just go little by little and trust that this little by little is going to get you where you want to go. All right, so I've evened out that end. It's about the same as the other end right now. It's a good place to kind of pause that action because we have brought the bulges back down to a flat state. If any of you had a question about this stripe here, this is not mandatory, but this is just something that I like to do for my flower canes when I have a border on them. Because when you're reducing a cane, you can't see what's going on the inside. And so when you're reducing a cane with a border like this, where the cane is covered, you can't see what's going on inside. And so you can't tell if it's gotten twisted on the inside. And with something like a flower cane, you can't have any twisting because you're going to be shaping the cane at the end. And then if you get the twisting inside the cane, then the pattern's going to get messed up as you cut through it. So putting this little strip of clay at the seam, at the bottom part of the petal that's going to get covered by the center of the flower, that's my way of making sure that the cane does not get twisted. Obviously, like, you know, if you're making a different kind of cane, you may not need to use this little stripe, but this is my little trick for making flower canes, if any of you were wondering. So now that I did that first round of evening out the bulged ends, I'm going to go back to squeezing from the center. So I'm going to do a little bit of four-corner compression right in the center, but I don't want to take the center too small. So now I'm going to focus a little bit away from the center until I get it about the thickness of the center. And then I'm going to move a little bit further away from the center, again, till I get it about the thickness of the center part. Turn it around, do the same thing. Patience, little by little. It's better than big aggressive squeezes. See, my center is a little bit thicker, so I'm just going to make sure that that's even. Just working my way out, squeezing instead of pulling. Same thing, flip it over. And now that I've kind of worked my way out almost to the end, we've got a little bit of a bulge again, right? And that's exactly what we're going for. That means that we are activating the center of the cane. And so I'm going to do the same thing, compressing in the end from the edge. It's really this step here that is going to determine how much waste you end up with. If you're really, really slow and really, really meticulous about it, you can have very, very little waste. I'm feeling a little bit impatient right now, so I'm going a little bit faster than I might if I was highly invested in having as little waste as possible. But I've already made a bunch of these sunflower canes, and I really just want to get this one reduced so that I can show you the end of this process. So it gets a little bit trickier as you get the cane smaller to reduce these ends. As you can see, I'm just going around compressing the edges. And then when I feel like I can't really get the center down anymore or compress the edges anymore, I'll go back down here and just gently squeeze to squeeze out a little bit more from the center. All right? And at some point, you're going to get like kind of some wrinkling and some rumpling on the ends. Like, you do need to have a little bit of waste with any type of cane reduction. But as you'll see, this method creates quite a bit less waste than the basic method of just rolling and pulling the cane. All right, so I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right there. And so now I'm going to turn it around and do the same thing. Also, when I get to this point, I find that it helps as well that instead of just pushing with this finger, like pushing back in, I'm also kind of pushing back in and going like this. Pushing and going like that to, again, encourage this part as I push it in to also push in towards the center of the cane. I know it sounds really complicated, but like the more you do it, the more you'll get a feel for it. I've reduced hundreds of canes like this, and it really does take that many times to get the automatic feel for it that I feel like I have now. So don't despair. Like, your first few tries are going to be messy, but just keep working at it. And the more you get to know this medium and the more you get to know this process, I promise, the better you'll get at it. So that's pretty flat. That's looking pretty good. And I still have a little bit more material here to squeeze and try to activate more of the center. So I'm going to do that. And just go back and forth between squeezing here and doing this edge compression technique. All right. And at some point, you're going to feel like you've done what you can for the first reduction stage, and you will just want to squeeze up the end. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm kind of accepting at this point that this is going to be waste. And that's okay. The way it goes is a little bit different with every cane. And the size of the cane that you start with can determine kind of like how much of a belly button you get at the end when you're done with this process. So that is the basic round cane reduction method that I use. At this point, if this is like as far as you want to take it, that's awesome. For me, since this is going to be a flower petal and I like to make really tiny flowers for earrings, I'm going to continue reducing it. So if I were to continue reducing a cane that's already long like this, I'm going to follow the same principles that I just went through with you. So I'm going to start again with like the 4 corners compression from the center and work my way towards the ends. And when you're starting with a longer cane, it's definitely like much easier to do this technique because you have not as far to go in terms of compression and reduction. And then when I get to approximately the place that I'm happy with for the size of the cane, that's when I will roll it, just to get it clean and smooth around the edge, and you know, the same thickness from one end to the other. And you can see, especially when you roll it, that's when you get, I don't know if you can see, actually it's kind of a dark line, but you can see when you roll it, that's really when you get a lot of twisting. So every time I roll the cane, I make sure to line back up my line. And now I can cut off the ends. And there we are. A successfully reduced cane with very, very little waste. So I hope this tutorial helps, and good luck and happy reducing.